Hey everyone, it's Delana with Zero Dark Thirsty. We are on another episode of Feel Graders Gone Wild, one of my favorite segments. I love this segment, celebrating and talking about getting the real stories from our Feel Grade officers. We're going to talk transition, talk about how they transition, the rough road, the bumps, all the things. And then also talk about the different areas that they can transition into, which I'm so excited to have in this episode. My friend, and I know I can say that, and it means a lot that I can, but my friend Paul Fidler to me, and I'm just excited that he's here. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll definitely tap into that Nebraska, that GBR you got going on in the
Go
background.
Big
We're
Red.
going to talk about
Go Big
that later.
Red.
We got a college
Yep.
football at some point, my friend. At some
Do it.
point. So, anyways, this is just going to be amazing. He has so much to offer. We've interchanged roles. I mean, there was times where you were asking advice. There's times where I was asking advice. I love that it's developed into that way. And then here we are. He works at Amazon. He is a senior procurement manager. I love that, but the biggest thing is I want him to talk about his journey as not going DOD. Like everybody's like, oh, go DOD. You're a colonel. You should be working for the government. No, you could do this instead. So you're one of many. Let me say that one of many. But you had some stumbles in your transition process with Kroger. Nothing negative with them, but it's just there were some stumbles there. But it ended up leading you to this amazing culture and place and where you're at now in position with Amazon. But let's kind of shoot back. So tell me about what you did when you were active duty.
So yeah, I spent almost 29 years in the Air Force as a logistics readiness officer. So I did about 4 years. I enlisted as a supply technician and then got my commission at the University of Nebraska and then became a supply officer and later a logistics readiness officer. So the majority of my career was spent, just doing supply chain and transportation distribution type things.
I love that. I love that. So when did you start thinking about transition? When did it become real for you and you actually kind of start down that path?
Yeah, probably 29 years ago. Yeah. Obviously, I think we all go through multiple times in our career when we consider, when is going to be the last day, right? That we put the uniform on. And so I really had it in my mind as my wife and I both had discussed the family plan, right, multiple times.
Right.
The last assignment, we took a last assignment, which for me was a group commander position at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, which to me was a kind of a career top end goal of mine, right? I pretty much said that, hey, anything after making E4 to me was gravy because that was all my original intention was to join the military for a few years, pay for some college, and then get out. And it just kept going and going. But so like I said, anything after that was just a blessing. And so when we decided to make that last PCS and that last assignment in command, it was a 2-year command assignment. So I knew at the end of that was going to be the end. So I really was kind of in the transition planning mode about 2 years, prior to actually retiring, which is which is helpful. I mean, it gave me some time to kind of plan things out. We knew where we wanted to live. We had an idea, and so it made that part of it easier as well.
And yet it wasn't Lincoln.
No, it was never. Yeah, no. No, it was not. Yeah, we live here in Middle Georgia. I don't know, 20 plus years ago, I was stationed here at Warner Robins Air Force Base, and I really enjoyed the area. I like the Southeast. My wife is a military brat, but she also retired from the Air Force as a lab officer a couple years before me. So, and her family lives in the Georgia, Alabama area. So we knew the Southeast is where we wanted to be, close to family, close to beaches, close to, all the things we love to do. And so we picked the Warner Robins area as our retirement home.
I love that. And It's the what is when you went into transition, what were some things that kind of worked for you when it came to networking, things like that? Because you and I didn't know each other before. That's something I do want to point out in a lot of the in every episode is I didn't know any of you before we met, but that doesn't make us, the beauty of the military family is it doesn't make us any less family. We're here for each other. But what were some things that you utilized that worked, and maybe some things that didn't?
Yeah, I will say that the biggest thing is just everybody stresses this, right? It's building that network and doing that early, and being I would say forceful and doing it with a purpose, right? Purposeful about doing it. I had some really good friends that had retired, obviously a year, 2, 3 years before me, and kind of paved the way for what I felt was a good template on how to network, how to build your list of contacts, and really just kind of start developing that resume and those things that, I felt I would need in transition, right? And so I started to do a lot of those things. And I think, to me, one of the things that I think I enjoy doing is networking. I enjoy meeting people and talking to people. And so it's helpful. I have friends that that are more introverted, and it's a little harder for them, right? And so it's not a second nature. So that really was the biggest thing, was just to start networking. And with your military contacts, that's great, but also those people outside the military too, right? Had an idea that I wanted to try something outside the DoD, right? I always knew the safety blanket would be to go back into either civil service, defense contracting, those kinds of things, because I knew a lot of people that did that, right? And they were successful at doing it. But I wanted to try something different. And I had a couple friends that had done that. They had gone into actually started working for Amazon or in finance or places like that. And so I wanted to give that a shot, right? At least try. So I started to develop some contacts outside of the military as well.
Of that. So, um, I love that you mentioned developing outside because in reality, I could even be considered an outsider because I'm not a veteran. Or not
Right.
technically. I mean, that's the reality is I'm not a veteran. So, and one of the things that I would praise you for is the fact that you didn't let that stop you. You didn't let, oh, well, she wouldn't understand. It's not that I need to understand your journey. It's that,
Mhm.
what you needed me for, which is at the time, I think resumes and LinkedIn was, hey, I gotta get this going. She knows how to do it. Let's go do it. It's more like almost like getting your car fixed. Like you don't need to know that the mechanic is a veteran. You just need to know that they're
Right.
qualified to fix your
Yeah.
car.
Right.
So, and that's kind of where that's at. And I want to point that out for a reason because a lot of times, and I've seen this, as an advocate, at your level, or at your rank level, they can kind of really just be just to their own, and there really can be a disservice to that. In order to transition successfully and really understand the civilian sector, you need civilians, and to have those ideas and to trust that there's people out there who, their want to help is means something, and their ability to be able to do some things. What are your thoughts, or your, where are you at on the utilizing outside resources outside of just your own? I kind of want to elaborate.
So I'm all in favor of using any resource that's available to you, right? Whether those are transition resources that the military provides, TAPS, executive TAPS, things like that, but also resources and training that you can find in tools like LinkedIn or Indeed and some of those platforms as well. There are a lot of those out there that really can be beneficial if you learn how to use them. And if your goal is to do something outside the DoD, the more you become familiar with those types of applications and platforms, the more helpful it's going to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. I mean, it's the one thing that I do talk about a lot with our transitioning veterans is, and I'm pretty sure you and I had the conversation at one point. The veteran suicide rate is attacking that, and to me, like, it's very layered on what leads veterans to that, but I can guarantee you one thing will, and that's not being able to pay your bills. I mean,
Mm.
I'm happy when my bills are paid. I might be depressed in other areas, but that's one area that I'm not depressed in is if
Right.
my bills are paid. So it's kind of getting that realness and understanding, hey, we're here for you. We need your mortgage payment paid. Your mortgage company doesn't care if you work at Lockheed or if you work at Billy Bob's tow service, as long as they're getting paid, right? So
Right.
I love the push to branch out, to seek out information from multiple resources and not just within your own. So, your first job out of the military was not what you do now. Even though I know, but walk me through what happened and stuff like that. Not only what happened, but we're eventually going to walk into how were you able to, I wouldn't say bounce back, but pivot successfully to where you are now. So you got your first job out of the military was what?
So, I'll start, with that transition process, right? I was nervous about finding employment, right? It wasn't because I was afraid of being able to pay bills or anything like that, but I've never been without a job, right? And so to
Mhm.
me, with, my family, young kids, all that good stuff, but moving to a new place where we didn't have a home. We were building our forever house, right? And my wife was transitioning to a new job as well. There were a lot of unknowns, right? And that's not uncommon for people who are doing this. So I wanted to have something locked in. I
Mhm.
just wanted that security blanket of something locked in. And you can have all the people in the world tell you, hey, you're going to have, 100 people beating down your door to hire you the day you retire. And hopefully that's true, right? For some people, that is true. But for many, many others out there, it's not true. And
Thank you for pointing that out. The
so,
reality is the
yeah, I'll
larger
tell you.
percentages it's not true.
No, and I will say, like the job search process is a humbling experience, right? For anyone out there, it is a humbling experience. Again, for somebody who's a retiring colonel, right? Coming out of the military. I have friends who were wing commanders, base commanders, general officers, right? It doesn't matter. It's a humbling experience, especially if you don't have a good, base of network to lean on, right? In that type of transition. So I was applying for anything out there I saw that I felt I qualified for, right? In supply chain, program management, acquisitions, anything like that. And so, and a lot of it was just cold applying, right? On jobs I would see that came across LinkedIn or Indeed or places like that.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that, a lot of those jobs probably already have people, that are projected to fill them, right? I mean, it's one of those things where, you kind of learn, I guess, through experience that,
I'm glad
you
you
know,
touched on that,
yeah,
projected
you
to
are the expert on
fill.
this. You can elaborate more on this, of course, but I think by law they have to post any job opening. Most companies have to post job openings, even if they have somebody projected to go into it anyway. Right? So,
Yep.
I'll tell you. Let's say if I applied for 100 positions out there through the course of a few months, I might have heard back from 20% of them. And that's just acknowledgement that they got my application, my resume, that, they were looking at something, right? The 80% that didn't respond, nothing. It's like being ghosted, right? And you just don't know. But it's a humbling experience, right? And so of those 100 applications, I probably did about 15 or so interviews from those, right? And so that was about my batting average, I would say. And it just so happened that one of those I'd applied for called me back and said, "Hey, we got your application for this position. Are you still interested?" When they talked about, I didn't even recognize the job that they had talked about, right? I had applied for so many, and I even said, to the recruiter, like, I'm sorry, which position is this for?" And she kind of laughed. She said, "Hey, I'm recruiting for Kroger Grocery Corporation. They're hiring a temporary program manager for their supply chain, operations. It's a 90 to 120-day role. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And they're like, "Well, hey, let's caveat this, right? It is contract. It is a 3 to 4 month role. But the way this usually works is if you do a good job, if they like you, if you like them, all that, typically they will find a permanent position for you, right?" And I said, "Okay, well, that sounds great. Yeah." And they're like, "Well, when can you start?" And I hadn't even started terminal leave yet, right? I was still wearing the uniform every day, going to work and doing my job as a group commander. And I said, "Well, I'm probably looking about, a month from now." And they said, "Hey, we need you to start in the next like week or two." And I said, I don't, okay. they said, "Well, hey,
That's
let's do
how
the
the
first
civilian
interview."
sector is sometimes.
Yeah, let's do the first interview. Let's see if you pass the first interview and then, go from there. And I said, "Okay, let's do that." And I did,
We'll
right?
take them
And
2 months to get your interviews done, but then we're like, "Okay, can
yeah,
you
they
start right
were,
now?"
I mean, yeah, it was luck and timing, right? I mean, the person they had somebody who was going to fill the role, but that person, backed out of it at the last second because they got a permanent job somewhere else. And so they needed a quick fill. And I
Woo,
called my
hold
boss.
on.
And
Hold
yeah,
on, hold on. So let's tap into something real quick. So
yeah,
you were not their first choice.
I was
Some
not.
people will walk away with not being the first choice when
Right.
they're coming out. So let's veterans hear this. Just because you're not the first choice doesn't mean you're not the right choice. So make sure that you stay like humble yourselves. Like it happens sometimes. Like he wasn't slated in the beginning,
Yeah,
but they kept him warm, they kept him right there because they knew, like, that way, if the first guy didn't take it, which there might have been something rolling around them knowing that it could happen, but they kept him around so that way they could still call him and say, "Hey, you're selected, let's do it."
sure.
So, that's a good thing, it can
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. I mean, you never know what's happening behind the scenes, right? And
Mhm.
so, again, I did that interview. It went well. I called my boss and said, "Hey, I need to start terminal leave like tomorrow." And he said, "Okay." And luckily, again, I had a lot of that stuff already, projected and planned. My replacement was going to be in place, and so it all was just good timing to do that. It just wasn't what I was initially planning on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you were
So
hoping for, like, a little bit of a break just to kinda
yeah,
spend
yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah,
girls
definitely.
and
And I
yeah.
would encourage that. Like if you have the ability and you're take your time, right? It's okay. Take your time. But I chose to not do that. And that's okay. I still think it was the right decision. Nothing wrong with that. I would say it was a great transition. Again, it was, all new processes, right? I mean, all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, we'll send you out your computer. We'll send you like kind of a how-to instructional, how to get everything hooked up, email, system platform, and start working. Hey, you start on, next Tuesday, right?" And so, um, all those things that, hey, I hadn't done for 30 years, right? And somebody walks you through all that stuff in the military. That's not the way it works in corporate America, right? In the real world, you figure that stuff out. So, especially at the time, this was still coming out of COVID, so everything was pretty much
Yes.
remote at the time. We were all in remote
Wasn't it
roles. So
2022, was it? Or
2022 it was
yeah,
the
yeah.
later end of 2022. Yeah, so there was nothing like, there was no going into an office or anything, all remote based. Yeah, but it was a great role. I really enjoyed it. I mean, again, the company was very welcoming. Really, I mean, to say they were military friendly, that I was the only person I knew that had military experience that worked, in the area that I was in. So my military experience didn't mean anything to them. I mean, not that they didn't respect it, but they certainly didn't understand it. And it was learning a whole new vernacular, new acronyms, profit loss, all those good things that corporate America values, right? That the military just doesn't talk about.
Profit
We
loss.
we
I'm
operate a
so
whole
glad
different
you
role.
brought that up. Well, let's hold on a
So
second. I want to get into that for our listeners because, like, that's something that I push. You have to understand profit loss, the cost of turnover, the cost of waste, there's a lot of things that you don't account for in your budget when you're at the O 06 level in active duty because you don't have to. If you need more, you just go ask for more. Not necessarily exactly like that. There's not really a turnover cost. There's not, your budget's just a little bit different. So the humility of understanding that they're still going to be, which is good. This is a good thing. You learning is a good thing. So there's still things to learn when you get into that position, even managing budgets that you hadn't done before. I love
absolutely.
that.
So it was, and I had to earn trust in that organization. Again, I didn't come from, their world, and certainly they didn't understand the world I just came from. It was a lot of, quick to spin up, especially since I knew it was going to be a temporary short-term role. I wanted to try
Hmm.
to make an impact in any way I could. Um, but I didn't have much time to do it. So yeah, it was a great role. And ultimately they did offer me a permanent position, but through that course of 120 days, I was still looking at other permanent roles because I didn't know if that was going to happen or not, and I really was keying in on Amazon, but I'd come to learn that Amazon is it's a tough shell to crack to get into the organization, right? And
Right.
especially the way that I want to do it. And I had referrals from friends. I knew people that were in the company. So I had as much help as I felt I could probably get. But by the time I finally got into the interview process, and we can talk about Amazon's interview process, but that in itself is a whole different, ball of wax, right? But I finally got into that. And I knew prior to getting offered the full-time role at Kroger that I was going to be offered a position at Amazon, and I was going to take that. So, but it was a tough decision. Like I really considered, which one do I want? I'm comfortable now. I love these people. They've treated me really well. Do I give this up for something that I don't know what it's going to be like? And so again, I made a choice, but and I think it was the right one.
I want to honor that choice or kind of give it a moment, to be honest with you, because that could have been scary. You were offered,
Absolutely.
you were learning a company, Kroger is not the same as Amazon. So it's not remotely the
Yeah.
same.
No.
So
No.
you
No.
were
Certainly.
learning
Yeah.
grocery stores,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you were offered a position. You could have stayed within your safety because that was safety, right? There's some safety to that and
Yeah.
security that you were provided. But you're like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to go with Amazon and make it happen. And so there's something to be said for that. There's some courageousness, some brave that you demonstrated to take that leap.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was it was, fun going from, again, still coming out of time. I was still on terminal leave, right, when all this was happening,
Mm.
and then, we had moved, we were still, getting into our house and figuring out our lives and all that good stuff, and so a lot was going on at the time, and again, still coming out of COVID, so the world was in a weird place, anyway. Yeah, it was interesting times. Yeah, I made the transition to Amazon and never looked back. But like you said, Amazon is its own monster for sure.
No, it absolutely is, and it's I don't really hear anything negative about it. I've heard a lot of positive when it comes to within their corporate structure and stuff like that. So I mean, if it fits, it ships. That's not Amazon, that's FedEx. But just saying, like if this is a place that fits, it fits the way that provides the culture that you need within your transition. So let's chat about hanging up the uniform. So
Yeah,
hanging
to,
up the
to
there's
me,
to me there's three different real periods of transition that happen. So there's about 6 weeks in to your first job, and you
yeah,
start realizing that the civilian sector is a happy mess and you're not going to fix the happy mess. And most veterans freak out because they're just like, I just do all the things that will make it go right. And it's like, it's because they're not gonna. Then there's that other part, because especially when you either skill bridge or you work on terminal leave, when you hang up that uniform, technically you're still in uniform. So when you hang up that uniform for real, there's an emotional transition there. And then there's the PCS. When you're due for PCS, but you're not active duty anymore. You've
yeah,
been in a place for 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, and you're like, all right, it's time to move on. And it's like, it's not time to move on. No, this is where you at. This is where
this
you
is
gonna
it.
be. You don't
This
have
is it.
to leave. You can just stay here and be happy. It's a thing.
Yeah.
You can do it. So I kind of want to go through each one of those. When you were in the civilian sector and you started realizing the happy mess that the civilian sector is, how were you able to kind of go through that?
Yeah, I would say that, the happy mess of the civilian sector, right? If we're talking about just the company itself, it is understanding that, there is a different mindset, right? At the time, Amazon was expanding exponentially, right? I mean, coming out of
Mm.
COVID, I mean, they grew, they grew large and fast, right? Everybody started ordering stuff from home because nobody was going to, the stores anymore. And so the part of Amazon that I work in or at the time in the beginning, was helping to do launch procurement. So all the suppliers that they work with, managing suppliers that help to do the construction, all the materials that go into new facilities, things like that, right? As they build new facilities around the world, I was managing, a handful of suppliers, right? Something that I hadn't done
Mhm.
before, but it fell in the supply chain world. So that made sense. But I think one of the best stories I remember early on was managing a racking and storage supplier that was putting in, $10 million worth of racking equipment into one of the new fulfillment centers out in California. And I got a call from the supplier saying, "Hey, we lost the shipment. We don't know where it is. And it's supposed to be there tomorrow." Right. And I call the site lead, let them know. And they're like, "Hey, you got to fix this, right? Like you need to get it here." And I'm like, what do you need me to do? And they're like, "You figure it out." Right. And so I called back the company. I said, "What are our options?" And they're like, "Well, we have, obviously we're looking for it. We just don't know. But you can reorder it." Right. And I'm like, "Well, this is $10 million worth of material. Like, I don't know if I can just reorder." They're like, and I call back and they're like, "Reorder it. That's just reorder it. We need it here. Right. We need it here because delaying operations will cost us way more than it will to figure out where this stuff is somewhere sitting
Profit loss.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna lose more money by not having it here." And like, "We'll figure it out later. It'll show up somewhere later. Don't worry about it." Right. And I'm like,
We'll put it in
if
another
I
place.
lost
It'll work out.
$10 million of material in the military, like I would, I'd be putting on a uniform to go to a court martial probably, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, but to Amazon, it was at the time, it was like no big deal. It just cost doing business right now, right? And so understanding that mind frame was was a transition, right? It just wasn't the way that I, grew up. And that's changed a little bit. I mean, there's certainly a little bit more, cost conscious now, I think, but still it is about profit and loss. Like what's the business case scenario and what makes the most sense and let's do it. Right?
Absolutely. And it could have been a moment for you if you think about it. $10 million, and you're about to have to call somebody and be like,
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't personally lose it. It's not your fault.
Right.
It's
Right.
but still the messenger is the one
Yeah.
who gets the biggest beatings, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Definitely.
you're the first one to deliver the bad news. But, there's something to be said about the get it done, you were a colonel. I mean, you had to get stuff done. You had to make it happen. You got to call whoever you need to call, whatever it is that needs to do. I
Yep.
mean, I feel like the veteran in you was really shining in that moment because when he told you, "I don't care, make it happen," you did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just tell me what my left and right limits are and kind of get out of the way, right? That's how we've been taught, right? And so Amazon's pretty good about that, right? They're a company that can afford to put, some of that autonomy into people, right? And go from there. So, yeah, I think that was a great lesson, as far as a transition, moment early on. Yeah, I think what's next? What's next on the list?
We're hanging up the uniform now, buddy. With hanging Oh, I know.
So Amazon's an easy place to hang up the uniform. While again, they're very military friendly, they are very pro veteran. They absolutely are. I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't really work with a lot of people who have experience in the military, right? I mean, there are a few of us in my organization, but I'm one of the few. And so, and
And you're
even as early
part
on
of
as
it. So I just want to be specific. He's not
yeah.
saying overall and Amazon as a whole. He's saying in his specific area of
Yeah, you'll
Amazon.
see
Yes.
more transition veterans go into like the operational side of Amazon, like in
Mhm.
the fulfillment centers, right? They're running the operations in Amazon, right? They're area managers or operations managers. So they're in operations, right? On the corporate side, you just don't see as many veterans, I would say. And so even in the interview process, right? And I'll throw this as a lesson learned too. Like you're going to have to learn when you start doing interviews, right? Even if it's in defense contracts, civil service, but especially if it's outside in the civil, in the commercial side, to change the way you speak, right? Demilitarize the way that you talk, the way that you write. Because when you're doing your interviews, if all you can speak is military lingo, most of the people you're talking to don't understand a word you're saying. Right. And so you have to train yourself to do that. And it takes practice. Again, learning a whole new language. Hanging up the uniform, if I threw a dart at 100 people on Amazon, they wouldn't even know what a colonel was. Right. I have no clue. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. Right. It certainly is not
Yeah.
a big deal to me, but
Well,
there are,
that's good because that makes you more Paul,
yeah. And that's what I
less
want. Right.
Colonel Fidler.
My transition plan was to not lead an organization, was to just run a program, be
Be a
responsible for
part of it.
myself. Yeah, for myself and try to make an impact with what I could do, right? And sure, I'm okay offering leadership advice and mentoring, all that good stuff. And I love doing that. But I didn't want to be leading an organization of thousands of people, right? That's not what I wanted to do in transition. And I got that. That's what I have at Amazon, right? I run my program. I'm on a team that I love. and I can offer any leadership advice or mentoring that they'll accept, right? But it's not about military.
So let's tap into that. So a lot of military transitioning service members, especially that '04 to '06, and I've seen a lot of this, they're looking for that flashy title, that flashy name. You're senior procurement manager. I mean, that's not essentially flashy. Not that
No,
it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't have
no,
weight, but they're looking for these specific, very specific things. Program managers, project managers, directors. They have to be a director, and there's a lot of misconceptions with understanding the pyramid structure of the corporate world and the corporate ladder, a smaller company versus a larger company, and things like that. And yours says senior procurement manager, and and I know senior, they think, oh, that's probably like an E8 or something. And what they don't realize is what that role really plays and why it is that it's senior and not director. And I think well, I know this because I've seen it. They're not understanding the pay rates either. So they're assigning what they think a pay rate is for a title based on their lack of experience working in the civilian sector. So they're assigning something. So they're not even applying the jobs that one they qualify for, and
right,
two pay really well because
yeah,
they're thinking they've got it programmed. I'm this rank, got to be a director, got to be a VP, got to be this. Help us understand, like speak to that. And since you retired, I mean, you're a full board colonel.
right. No, you do have to understand the way that whatever company you're looking at, the way their pay structure, their grade structure is built on, right? And so Amazon, it is a little different, although you can kind of relate a little bit to the way the military works. So the initial grades are based on an L1 to L10, right? On that scale. And L1 is, I don't know, the new guy in a warehouse picking a part off a shelf and putting it into a box, right? That's probably like your L1, L2s, right? I'm an L6 at Amazon, right? And what does that mean? I don't even know if you call it middle management, to be honest, right? I'm also an individual contributor, right? And so what that means in corporate lingo is I'm a program manager, right? I manage a program. I manage myself. I don't lead people. I don't have any what we call direct hires, right? Direct hire is the terminology that they use, on the commercial side.
That's what
I
I
don't have
wanted
any
you to get to. Yep.
yeah, I don't want any direct hires underneath me, right? I manage myself. And so that's the way that it's built on the corporate side. Now, there are L6s on the operations side that might lead teams of hundreds of people, right? In the fulfillment centers, things like that, because that's how that structure is based. But on the corporate side, it's not the same. But when you equate that to the pay scale, okay, so let me go back to, okay, so an L10 in Amazon, well, you're talking the equivalent of probably like a 2 or 3 star general in the Air Force, right? Getting close to that VP level, right? They lead large
Mhm.
organizations or divisions at Amazon, right? If you're an L10 at Amazon, you're leading a lot of people and you're responsible for billions and billions and billions of dollars of resources, right? Whatever those may be. So there is
Let's
some,
let's point out the difference between
yeah.
hold on, I'm gonna jump in because military do this on their resumes. I'm responsible for $20 million
Mhm.
of equipment, things like that. So help us understand being responsible for equipment and respond. And I know I'm diverting, but I really want to. This is a thing on resumes. The difference in being responsible for equipment and the responsibility of resources, like you just described or talked about.
Yeah, I would say that, if you get outside the individual contributor role, right, you actually are managing people, right? And a piece of an organization at Amazon, right? Now you have direct hires underneath you. That increases your scope of responsibility. But the programs that you're responsible for, whatever those may be, have a dollar amount assigned to them, right? There's money attributed to that, right? Whether it's procurement actions, right? How much are you buying, procuring, right? How much are you responsible for managing with a supplier, right? How much do we purchase with them? It could mean lots of different things. It just depends what your role is at Amazon, right? If you're a project manager, it translates to, project management on the military side, right? You manage a program or a project of certain amount of dollar value, right? It's pretty similar, but I would say I think the scope at Amazon is a lot higher.
Yes.
it
Oh,
definitely
yes.
can it can be. But that's just the nature of the size and scope of Amazon. And, the way they delegate responsibility down to lower levels too, right? And so, yeah, but if we're talking pay scale wise, okay, as an L6 Amazon, I make more than I did as an O6 in the Air Force. What does that mean? Yeah, I mean, I don't lead
That's after
anybody.
BAH and all the things, right?
Yeah, just gross pay, everything, right? Gross
Yep.
pay. Dollar for dollar, I make more than I did in the Air Force, right?
I want to point that out because I guarantee you, there's O6s, O5s, and O6s who are retiring, and they'll look at senior and not realize how much money that job really pays.
Right.
And kind of bypass it. They'll keep scrolling. Oh, it doesn't say director, so I gotta keep going. And yet they're bypassing a job where they could be making more money than they do active duty after BAH and everything else. Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
pointing that out.
You definitely understand, yeah, understand the pay scale, right? I mean, that's important, like you said. Again, when you look at a job application and it says the scales between 150 and $220,000, right? That's a huge range. I mean, that's a big range, right? But again, maybe you fall into the right side of that range and you're gonna pull in, the higher end of that, right?
No, I love that. I'm glad that you pointed that out. So we're gonna run into PCSing. So we're automatically wired. We're wired. 3 year, 2.5 years, we start getting itchy, start getting antsy. We gotta start looking around, even though we don't have a reason to in reality. But we can manifest a reason to because we are wired to start finding something else at that 2.5 year mark and moving at 3 years. This leads to veteran turnover, which companies want to curb. We want to curb because this actually can cause stress to the veteran that they really didn't need. They didn't need to move. They can just stay where they're at and be happy. So
Right.
let's talk about that feeling, that emotional transition, and kind of how to get through that part.
Yeah, I will say that, that was one of the things I looked forward to the most, right? Was getting settled into a place to live, a community, a job, right? And really feeling like there was no pressure to leave or change or PCS or anything like that, right? But you have to train yourself to that. I mean, my wife was a military brat. She's done this her entire life, and so it was. It's balancing that, right? I'd only done it since I was in the military, but it's been a long time. But we have young daughters. I mean, my daughter at the time I retired was 5 years old, lived in 5 different states in 5 years, right? And so,
I hear you on that.
yeah, I mean, and
Brady
and
too.
a
Brady's
lot
been
of
in
a
so
lot of
many
people,
schools.
will be able to relate to that, right? It was something that we said, "Look, this is the time to slow down," right? And we wanna be able to
Yep.
give the ability to our children. So, we look forward to that ability to just settle, to get ingrained into a neighborhood and, a community and make friends that, and for our girls to have friends that they're gonna have their entire lives, hopefully, right? That kinda thing.
I like that you focused in on your family unit and use that as being what grounded you. You took a look at the holistic view of, what your kids had gone through being, and not that it was negative,
Yeah,
but you looked at it holistically and what they gone through being military kids, and what your wife, she was a military kid and eventual military herself, and how that could be unsettling, how that could affect them and things. So I don't want to say applaud because I feel like that's not really the right word, but it's as a parent, I appreciate that. Because we had to make those decisions, and I'm looking at those decisions. Am I moving? Well, I'm looking for a job myself, and most of the jobs I'm looking for are somewhere else. I'm a 17.5-year-old. He's got a year and a half of high school left. Am I making the right decision? So I can appreciate that aspect, and honestly, I just love it that the first thing you mentioned actually was your daughter and then your wife. And if you listen to your response, I love that. That was you could tell that that's what came first, and that's what matters to you the most.
absolutely, absolutely. That's certainly what grounds me. That is my priority, right? It certainly is, and has been for for a very long time. So yeah, I don't think you can ever go wrong if you focus on family, right? I think you said putting up the uniform again. I think that, you can find ways to still feel like you have part of that uniform on. I mean, hey, I'm wearing an Amazon military shirt, right? Because I help run their Hire Our Heroes program for our division. So I help to transition, veterans who
Love
may want to do the
it.
Amazon. So I do try to stay connected as much as I can, right? In that sort of way. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, and I kind of just to kind of wrap us up a little bit is they have a huge hiring a huge skill bridge program actually. They have a very robust skill bridge program. It's all over the place, at least from my experience advocating and working with veterans, trying to get into the Amazon and stuff like that. Huge, robust, and I love it. I absolutely love it. All the ability, they really took the bull by the horns. Military and veteran and mil spouts hiring early on, essentially before it was cool. They were already I say that because it's true, it really wasn't we didn't have the platform that we had. And I think Amazon was kind of a contributor to that when they were like the military shirts start coming out and we support and we want to help and we want to do and stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate that sort of that they did that for our community. Before we wrap up, do you have any last words?
It's absolutely going to be okay. There are a lot of people out there that want to help you that you don't even know, right? You've never met before. It's okay to reach out to people that you've never met before, whether that's on LinkedIn or some other social media platform, right? I encourage it, right? That's how I met Delana, right? A friend of a friend recommended her to take a look at a resume, right? Because I wanted
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Let's wrap this thing up. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here and for talking to us and giving us a great perspective in his journey. His journey isn't like everybody else's. You want to know why? Because no journey is like everyone else's. You're all different. That's the point in this podcast or in this segment. A Feel Graders Gone Wild on Zero Dark Thirsty is to help you guys not only with advice, but also real transition stories. So then that way we can get you going and hopefully you'll have success transitioning in the civilian sector. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today. I'm so glad we got your video working at the last minute.
I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. Thank you.
All right,
Sorry.
guys, we'll see you on the next episode. Definitely make sure you tune in. Zero Dark Thirsty, Feel Graders Gone Wild, and any other segment that we have. Mafia Made, which is another favorite of mine. Perks Patrol, we've got Education, Ed Hoc Report. It's all here. Definitely stay tuned. Lots of episodes dropping, and I'll see you guys on the next one.